Namaste and welcome back to Waking Up with Mindful Serenity Yoga. We're going to continue answering questions from the jar. I am going to be transparent here and let you know that I'm aware of what the next question is going to be. Someone had asked me recently how they could handle their anxiety better, and I tried to explain to them this idea of working the pause. It's something I've done the last two or three videos on. And they had a very challenging time understanding what I was saying. So I'm going to attempt again to answer the question they asked me and share it with you, and hopefully it will make sense. If not, I'll try better next time. So thank you for joining me. I will begin by reaching for the question, which I already know what it is. And the question was, could you talk more about the pause and what happens in it? I'm so anxious. I can't seem to extend that pause beyond my reactions. Could you talk more about the pause and what happens in it? I'm so anxious. I can't seem to extend that pause beyond and beyond my reactions. So I am going to put that down, and I'm going to start the timer. Oops. And I'm going to take a nice deep breath to kind of ground myself. And exhale. So the person wants to know how to work the pause. Basically, they want to know what is actually happening in the pause. They are expressing a great deal of anxiety, and that anxiety leads them right into reactivity and into emotional experiences that they're not happy with. So let's look at that pause again. And what are you talking about, crazy lady, when you say work the pause? The pause I'm speaking about is something that exists between a stimulus or an external event, whatever life gives us to help us learn, or whatever it's given us for. It may have a billion reasons that have nothing to do with us. Those things that show up in front of us, like I said, are not always personal, but we tend to take them personal. So whatever life gives us, be it a life situation or some person coming into our lives that maybe is not positive or says something negative or says something positive, because it can work both ways, but we're focusing on the negativity here. And we have this stimulus. Between that and the time that we actually either reflex, which is automatic, usually physiological, or react, which is a lot of times mental and emotional, leading to behavior that we're not, thinking out clearly enough, or before we respond, which is something we're trying to do in yoga. We're trying to respond rather than react. And that responding requires us utilizing the pause that takes place between that stimulus and that reaction. Utilizing it, expanding it, sitting in it, inhabiting it, embodying it, and being a part of it, so that we can see clearly both the stimulus that triggered us as well as the response or reactivity we have. What is happening in that pause, crazy lady? Well, in that pause, though we are not conscious of it usually when we are on reactivity, it just happens so fast, even in reflexivity, we're not aware of it. It just seems like an automatic thing that happens. When I put my hand on the stove, I automatically pull it away. Reflex. When I have a reaction, emotional reaction or behavioral reaction that's filled with emotions, intense emotions and thoughts, I may do something I regret. Someone comes up and says something to me that I don't like, I may slap them across the face. It seems so automatic because we're not conscious of it. We're not taking the time to become aware of it. There is this pause there, this stillness, this spaciousness that we're not utilizing. So when Viktor Frankl, who came up with this idea basically of working the pause, or just realizing that most of our problems are associated with not utilizing this pause enough, not expanding it so that we are clear-minded, when we don't use that pause, we have a tendency towards unconscious reaction. So a lot of times it's unconsciousness, it's not knowing it's there, but that doesn't mean it's not there. That pause is a part of our experiencing. We're just not focusing our conscious awareness on it. So we're not aware of it. And that's why these things, reflexes and reactions, seem so automatic. Reflexes, how can they be? How can we be aware of them, and how can we do anything about them? Normally they are very physiological, and the knee-jerk reactions we get when we put our hand on the stove are very quick physiological reactions that don't even tend to go to the brain. They just stay in the spinal cord, from the sensory neurons, mixed neurons, back down into the efferent, or the motor neurons, to pull the hand away. But there is a pause there. In fact, yogis through the time have experimented with that pause, and were able to expand it and extend it. In other words, they were able to get beyond the physiological reaction of pain that comes with the amygdala response, in that sense that there's something going on that we pull back from. For example, they have been able to walk on hot burning coals without even burning their feet. They've been able to pierce their flesh without even feeling the pain of the knife wounds. They've been able to, burn themselves basically without the need to pull back. They have shown that with the utilization of this pause, with the work that we can put into it, there is this possibility of expanding that spaciousness so much that we can avoid feeling physical pains and get beyond our so-called physical limitations. Of course, that's not what this is about, and that's something that's, very controversial, if you believe me or not. But if you study some of the yogic literature, you'll realize that some people have been able to get beyond that reflexology. Reactivity is something we're all familiar with, and again, that is very unconscious. That is our behavioral reactions based on, and when I say actions, again, especially when we're speaking karmically, I'm talking about the reactions of the body actually doing something like slapping the person across the head. But it also includes that emotional reaction, the thoughts and the feelings that come when we are triggered by the stimulus over here, okay? So that is included in that. We're just not aware. Everything seems to be happening so fast. We may be aware of feeling uneasy and whatever, but we're not looking deeply into that pause. So the goal then is, in yoga as well as in Buddhism, and I'll show you a little excerpt I have from a wonderful book by Thich Nhat Hanh in a minute. The goal is to extend that pause so we're not reacting, so we're responding to life rather than reacting to it. In that pause, a great deal is going on, whether we're aware of it or not. And so the first thing we need to do, and this is what this particular video is about, this is what I tell this person, you have to be aware of what's coming up in these pauses between the stimulus and the reaction. We have to slow down time enough so that we are aware of what's going on inside of us when we are triggered by something in the external environment. So maybe a critical remark, and then we ended up slapping the person across the face. But in there was that spacious pause. And in that spacious pause, whether we were aware of it or not, a lot was going on. I had the sting of the external stimuli that's going on right now, but I also had a release of a lot of stuffed and stored, I'm going to call them some scaras because that's the yogic term, stuffed and stored, emotionally charged memories that I have stuffed inside, related very much to what this person said, or otherwise it wouldn't have triggered me. So when we are triggered by an external stimuli, when someone says something that we deem as unpleasant and we fly off into a reaction, what's really happening is that trigger is loosening and digging into some old wounds I've already have inside me that the yogic world calls samskaras. And because they've been rattled around a bit, they start to emerge to the surface again. They were stuffed below my conscious awareness, so I didn't have to deal with them. At the time of the incident, the original wounding, someone said something very harsh to me, or they punished me, or they did something to me that I clung to and stuffed down through a variety of defense mechanisms, including repression and suppression, until it formed a knot or a core belief within me that blocked a lot of the energy, the Shakti energy, for coming up. And it blocked my experience of life because it was so in the way of me seeing life clearly. More importantly, what was in the way was my refusal to have it come up so I could deal with it. So every time an external stimuli rattled it, it was this intention, Shakti's intention, to get this stuff out of me, to purify me. But every time something over here happens in the external world that triggers this, what's going on inside, and it starts to come up, the key word happens. The key thing happens when we talk about that pause and what lays in that pause. And that is resistance. Resistance with a capital R. I resist the experience. I resist feeling this pain coming up from these stored samskaras. I resist the sting of this because I know if I accept the sting of this, it's going to make all this other stuff come up, and I'm going to be compounded with all these painful emotions and memories that I don't want to deal with. So what do? I spend all my time and energy keeping them, pushing them back down, keeping these samskaras hidden away from my conscious awareness. Life is just doing what life does, but you could say life is here to teach us, so it's sending these things my way, and so that these things inside me get triggered and come up and I can release them. But I'm spending all my effort pushing them back down so I do not have to deal with them. That takes so much energy. I heard a psychologist say once to a group that I was teaching in response to a tragedy that had happened to one of the group members. They said it's like trying to hold a rubber duck down below the surface of the water in a bathtub. You take all your energy, you hold it down, but as soon as you let go, or as soon as something else catches your attention, or as soon as something comes up that you need that arm for, that rubber ducky just pops up to the surface again. And then you have to put all this energy once again pushing it back down. So we're spending so much energy holding that thing down below the surface. And when we're concentrating on holding it down below the surface, we can't see possibly the good things that are happening in our lives that are not related to this triggering or related to this thing that is either actual or potential. I should say that too. A trigger doesn't necessarily be showing up right now in our life, but if we are focused on the possibility of it showing up, as happens a lot of time in anxiety, where, what if this happens, what if that happens, then that has the same effect. We're still holding that fear down, doing whatever we can to control the environment out here so it doesn't trigger us, and holding that suppressed feelings that are so naturally intent on coming up and leaving us to be experienced so they can go. But we're holding them down. So in that moment between the stimulus, the person saying something to us, and the time we slap them across the face, our reaction, there was this emergence of samskara layers. There was this activation, this reemergence of feelings that we had stuffed down. And of course, with resisting this event, resisting the coming up, we're putting great deal of energy and effort pushing them back down. That's taking all our time and focus away. So consciousness is used then to hold these feelings down and to prevent the outside world from triggering us. And we're missing out on 99% of our life experience. All our energy, conscious and physical and emotional and mental, is going into keeping these samskaras down. One of the most common samskaras that we tend to repress and suppress and do our best to keep down, that we resist experiencing, because again, the key word here is resistance. I'm resisting the emotions, I'm resisting what is happening in my external environment, therefore I'm resisting life as it is. When we do that, one of the key reasons for it is a samskara built around the emotional charged energy of fear, okay? So we're afraid. So when this person who says they're so anxious, I can't even think about a pause, I'm just reacting. And most of the reaction is based on a stimuli of it happening in the future, not happening right now. I can't do that. What if that happens? I can't go there. What if that happens? I can't talk to that person. What if they say that and trigger me? So their whole life is built around not being triggered, not having this anxiety come up, because they do not want to experience it. They do not want to look at it. Well, Thich Nhat Hanh wrote an amazing book called Fear, Essential Wisdom for Getting Through the Storm. And it was written in 2021, maybe 2012. Just a second, I have to check the copy right here. 2012. And there is one passage in it that explains beautifully what I'm trying to say here. And I wish I could get this person to absorb these words, but of course they're only going to absorb them when they're ready, right? It's all about looking at what's emerging when we're triggered, okay, in that pause. The first part of looking at our fear is just inviting it into our awareness without judgment. We just acknowledge gently that it is there. This brings a lot of relief already. Then once our fear has calmed down, we can embrace it tenderly and look deeply into its roots, its sources. Understanding the origins of our anxieties and fears will help us let go of them. Is our fear coming from something that is happening right now? Or is it an old fear? A fear from when we were small that we've kept inside? When we practice inviting all our fears up, we become aware that we are still alive, that we still have many things to treasure and enjoy. If we are not busy pushing down and managing our fear, we can enjoy the sunshine, the fog, the air, and the water. If you can look deeply into your fear and have clear vision of it, then you really can live a life that is worthwhile. So when we're anxious, and we are not anxious, I should say that, we are experiencing anxiety. But it is the human tendency to take our experiences and identify with them to the point we believe that is who we are, right? Anxiety is not something we are. It is something we are experiencing or have at the present time. It is not who we are. So if we can, first of all, realize that this is just an experience, and like all things in life, it is just temporarily. So when we're triggered by an actual threat to, a threat of having this anxiety triggered, or a potential one, the what if syndrome and the worrying that comes with anxiety, if we could, instead of resisting, doing whatever we can to avoid it, push it back down, suppress and repress, deny it, run from it, as we tend to do with anxiety. One of the biggest coping mechanisms in dealing with anxiety is avoidance, which is in a sense a form of running away, right? But we know that with avoidance, anxiety gets worse, okay? If I have an anxiety condition, again, I have there, it is not who I am, I'm just experiencing this anxiety temporarily. If I have such a condition, if I have this experience of anxiety, related, say I have a panic attack once when I go into a grocery store, one particular grocery store, I'm going to want to avoid, because my intent here as a human being who is still ego evolved and has not worked the space enough, is going to be wanting to avoid that particular grocery store because I know I had an anxiety or a panic attack in that store. I don't want to have one again. So at first, I will just not go into that store. But eventually, my fear will expand. Instead of the space expanding, my reactivity will expand until I say that I can't go into any grocery store. I will begin avoiding all grocery stores. That fear may grow because I'm not facing, not dealing with the space, not working with the space, not allowing the fear to come up to and willing to deal with it. it may go to all stores in general. So then I'll be at a point where I'll be avoiding all stores in fear of having my anxiety triggered. It may be even expanding to all buildings. And from there, it may expand to being outside my house. And a very common and drastic form of anxiety avoidance is something called agoraphobia. And it is a fear of leaving the space, the comfort zone of the home. So what happens with this anxiety is that we are really not experiencing life. We're diminishing the life experience around us, cutting back what we can and cannot do in fear of being triggered by, having our anxiety triggered, that our world becomes very, very, very tiny because of this defense mechanism of avoidance. Don't want to do anxiety. It takes so much effort to keep that anxiety at bay. We're not only manipulating the external world by eliminating all the threats out there, we are constantly pushing it up, because anxiety, like any emotion, just wants to come up. Shakti's pushing it up. It wants to be experienced and it wants to go. But the more we push it down, the more we hold it down. We're using all this valuable energy doing this, focusing on doing this thing of keeping the anxiety away, that we miss the beautiful experience of life. We miss, as Thich Nhat Hanh said, experiencing the air and the water, experiencing nature, experiencing the beauty of life, knowing that all the conditions we need for happiness are already in here. But we're not thinking about that. We're just thinking about keeping ourselves safe from harm, from having that anxiety activated, that sense of not being safe activated. We spend all our lives, avoiding anxiety. And our world and life becomes very, very small. Now that's just one samskara, okay? When we're talking about anxiety, it's just one way of experiencing fear, which is a very common emotion. And fear is just one of the many emotions that are wrapped around these samskaras that we stuff inside, right? So it's just one experience. But Thich Nhat Hanh says it so beautifully when he tells us that, we're wasting our time, we're wasting our lives pushing this anxiety down. What we need to be able to do with fear is allow it to come up. Look at it deeply, Look at it. See where it's coming from. Investigate the roots of it. Every weed that comes up has roots, but you can pull the top of a weed off and keep pulling it off. But until you get to the roots of it, you're going to still have weeds in your garden, right? We're referring to the mental garden here. So we really need to get to the roots of that fear. Why is this thing here that happened triggering this fear, or that's about to happen, triggering this fear in me now? Why is it coming up? So once we take our hands away from pushing down, and we, despite how uncomfortable it is, commit and are willing to allow that experience to come up so we can examine it. Thich Nhat Hanh always used to use the example of having that, whatever it is we do not want to face, sit beside us on the couch, just sit right beside us and say, oh, welcome fear, or welcome anxiety. I know you've been trying to get my attention. Have a seat beside me. And we do so non-judgmentally when we investigate this fear. We're not beating ourselves up. Oh, what's wrong with me? Why am I afraid of that? That's so silly. No room for that. It's there. It's wanting to come up. Just look at it. Be compassionate with it, and be compassionate with yourself for having that experience of fear or anxiety. You are human. Something triggered a sense of not being safe with you for whatever reason. The amygdala began to overfire, probably from some type of conditioning, having the same messages repeated over and over again, or having the same experiences from life repeated over and over again. So now your amygdala is super vigilant, constantly telling you things are a threat when they're not. And you're listening, because we have a tendency to listen to our mind. And most of it's just around preserving this sense of little me, or this little self, right? Regardless, don't beat yourself up for having these feelings of anxiety. The goal here is just to allow them to come up, no matter how terrifying it is. Be willing to sit with them, look at them. This feels terrible. I see you, anxiety. This feels terrible inside. My gut is erect. I just want to run away. But I'm going to do my best to sit here with you so I can see where you're coming from and see why you've been interfering with my ability to enjoy my life for so long, to be fully in my life. I'm told these conditions of happiness are here, but I'm not able to focus on them because you tend to be in the way. I'm allowing you to be in the way. Now I'm willing to let you come up so I can experience you, feel you fully, no hard feelings. I know you're just doing your job trying to protect me. Now can you please leave? And it's not going to go right away, right? But the more we work this pause, the more we're aware of this pause, this spaciousness. And what we've done there when we had the anxiety sit beside us, as Thich Nhat Hanh has taught, is we've wrapped the arms of mindful awareness around it, of stillness around it, of presence around it. We allowed it to be. We have made friends with it in a sense, instead of enemies that we had to resist. We've accepted and allowed the anxiety. Because regardless if you want it there or not, you have no control over the external environments. You know, you can spend your rest of your life trying to control them, but you're not going to be able to control all of them. Anxiety is going to come up. It's a very human emotion. Fear is a very human emotion. It does not have to dominate our lives. But if we continue to resist it, it will. So it's not the anxiety or the fear that is causing us so much trouble. It is our resistance of it, our need to keep pushing it down, our refusal to look at it and to investigate it deeply. It's our refusal to allow it to be that is causing our samskaras, causing the blockages of energy flow, stopping us from experiencing the conditions of happiness that are always in us and have always been with us, and from experiencing the beauty and grandeur of this world and this life experience we have been given to explore. When we're focusing on our fears, pushing them back down, we're not living life fully. So it is a process, learning to expand our pause means accepting the samskaras that are rising up. And it, like I said, doesn't have to be fear, but in this case, we're just using anxiety and fear. Being willing to see them and sit with them, putting away the arms of resistance, because that's the number one problem, not the actual feeling or experience. It's the resistance to it. Being willing to look at it, allow it, look at it, experience it to some degree. And you don't have to do it all at once, just a little bit here, okay? Then do whatever you have to do to close down again if you have to, until the next reaction. But just know these stimuli, because of karma, are going to keep coming and coming and coming and coming until the anxiety is gone. So you're never going to run from the experiences. You're never going to be able to control them. They're going to keep coming back because it is their goal, life's goal, in a way, even though it's impersonal and it's happening for billions of other reasons. But it is life's goal to help us to learn and expand the pause, expand as human beings in this spaciousness. Because what else is in this spaciousness besides the emotions that are coming up and the samskaras, underneath these emotions and samskaras, is our true self, our higher self, our consciousness, our awareness, our presence, our stillness. And it is there that's what we want to expand. It is our spiritual self. Okay, we want to expand that. Eckhart Tolle had a beautiful line in one of his podcasts, and I can't even give you the name of the podcast, but he said, "Let the person become transparent to the light of consciousness." Our reactivity and our doing, even our responding, if it comes to physical action or any type of action, is all about a backwards journey away from the center, the space, because the space is who we are. And what brings us back to that space is our ability to sit in it, stillness, quiet, and experience what is as it is. Both what's happening out here that came in through our five senses and what's happening in here because of it. Accepting, honoring, embracing, experiencing what is. That's what this spaciousness is all about. Because that space is who we are. When we embrace it, we embrace true self. We are taking the journey back to source. Whereas our doing and our action, especially our reaction, reflexing, takes us further from source, stillness and being expanding of the space, making that our number one goal in life, the working of this pause, building the spiritual self, is the answer to fear, anxiety, and all the other emotions that block us and keep us from experiencing the Satchitananda, as the yogis say, eternal consciousness bliss, the truth of who we are. Wow, I went way over time, and that was one big, long answer. But I'm hoping it helps. Thank you so much for joining me, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Namaste.